Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Victoria Nalule, and in today's webinar, we're going to explore the energy needs for Africa and Latin America. We have exciting experts, energy experts, international energy experts, who have joined us for this discussion, including Dr. Mabea Geoffrey. We also have Diana, we have AD, we have Professor Pablo. So what will happen is each one of them is going to introduce themselves, but before that, I'd like to give an introduction about myself. I'm Dr. Victoria Naule, and I'm the host of this webinar, which is being organized by Naule Energy and Minerals Management Initiative, Naule Energy and Minerals Consultants. And you can go to our website to watch all the various webinars we've held, the various research insights, and definitely you'll see the presentations that our participants today, or our experts, will be presenting. So feel free to download all the slides from there. So before we start, I would like Dr. Mabea to briefly introduce himself.
Thank you, Dr. Nalule. My name is Dr. Geoffrey Mabea. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Energy Regulatory Association of East Africa, essentially tasked with spearheading the harmonization of energy policies of the 6 countries, which includes supporting capacity building initiatives, as well as ensuring sharing information amongst the member countries. So briefly, that's what I do. Thank you. And thank you for inviting us.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Mabea. Diana, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Victoria. Thank you for the invitation. I am Diana Lizarraga. I am a Peruvian qualified lawyer. I also hold an LLM in Petroleum Law and Policy by the University of Dundee. And at this moment, I am working as a senior contact coordinator in the Peruvian Oil and Gas Agency, Perupetro. And I am also a part-time lecturer at the University of ESAN and the University Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú. Thank you once again for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Diana, for the introduction. Eddie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with such excellent speakers panel, and thank you, Victoria, for inviting me. I am Dr. Eddie Wifa. I am a lecturer, energy law lecturer at the University of Aberdeen, and also the director of the African Natural Resource and Energy Law Network. I work on a range of issues following from oil and gas decommissioning, but my specific expertise is in marine, offshore, renewable energy risk governance. So I basically analyze regulations that have to do with health, safety, and ecological risk of marine renewables. So again, it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to an interesting discussion on such a really, really relevant topic.
All right, thank you very much, AD. Pablo, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, Victoria, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Pablo Ferrara. I am PhD in sovereignty disputes on offshore oil and gas. It's funny because I was shortlisted for your position at Aberdeen. I am currently professor at the University of El Salvador in Argentina at the School of Law. I was appointed at the University of Petroleum and Energy in India, in Dehradun, that is. Formerly, I was consultant to the Ministry of Energy and Mining, and before that at the Argentine Congress on Energy Issues.
All right, thank you very much for the introduction. So in today's discussion, we want to focus on the energy needs for Africa and Latin America. We are all aware that the world is transitioning to a low carbon economy. But however, some countries that are rich with fossil fuels, they are worried with respect to the decline in investments in fossil fuels, that is oil, gas, and coal. So this enabled me to come up with the concept of energy progression, whereby I argue that whereas the world is transitioning to a low carbon economy, we need to embrace a softer transition, or let's call it energy progression, whereby some countries like Uganda that have their resources can still utilize oil and gas to tackle energy poverty and energy access challenges, not only in Uganda, but also other developing countries in Africa and Latin America. So in today's discussion, we want to explore the various energy challenges we face in Africa and Latin America. And we're asking ourselves, should we embrace energy transition? Should we embrace energy progression? And what do these experts think about these the two concepts of energy transition and energy progression? So to start off the discussion, I will invite Dr. Mabea, who will present on the issue of energy transition or energy progression and how he understands it. Dr. Mabea, would you like to start off with the discussion?
Thank you so much, Dr. Nalule. I have a presentation probably just to guide us through. I understand we have 10 minutes, but just to probably bring you to speed, I'll give a background of, Africa needs, and especially with regards to the transition, just to be able to lay, background of where we are and what we're doing and the roadmap for Africa and how we come in, and then probably go back to the question that you've asked. Now, we all understand that in Africa, we have essentially three key commitments that the governments have, put in place to be able to drive this agenda of energy transition. We all are aware of the African Agenda 2063, the UN 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. But just to probably bring it a little bit closer home, the drivers of the energy transition in Africa, it could be varying from one place to the other, but the overarching drivers is essentially the rapid decline in renewable energy costs, and also the improvement in the energy efficiency. There's also widespread electrification, increasing smart technologies, continual technological breakthroughs, as well as we have well-informed, policy mechanisms that is being put in place at the moment. And of course, there is the need to have the climate change mitigation. In addition to that, there is also the essence of improving the energy security and socio-economic benefits, or what we call the economic welfare. Just to dig in a little bit deeper on the Agenda 2063, which essentially is summarized into four main areas, which includes the, providing a system, a robust system that will be based on renewable energy, and also to be able to provide, enhancement to localized manufacturing sector, and most importantly, to be able to provide highly qualified human resource. This is very important because for us to be able to drive this agenda, then we must be able to have people or experts who are able to really guide through, who can be able to provide, capacity in those areas. And also to provide integrated energy infrastructure, be it on the gas as well as and the electricity. I have focused so much on the electricity because that's my area mostly. But I just wanted to bring a picture on what is really going on in Africa, in particular when you look at the deployment of renewable, or the harnessing of the renewable energy in Africa. So there is a trend. If you look at it keenly, there is a trend that everyone is thinking about the transition, from one end to the other. But what I want to bring out is that even as we consider this, even as we look at the transition from fossil fuel based to renewables, we have challenges, and probably I want to point out some of the key challenges that we are faced, or we are facing, when looking at this transition. One of the key things that we have identified is that there is this persistent reliance on biomass, on traditional biomass. This has been an issue for a long time, and it still continues to be an issue. But there is also heavy reliance on, fossil fuel, in particular when we're looking at generation. And also we have a poor infrastructure. This has been one of the key issues that we have, as Africa, we are suffering from. Without, robust infrastructure, then it's not easier for us to be able to achieve the targets or the goals, or probably to increase the energy access as it ought to be in Africa. We also have very low rates of electrification when you're looking at the electricity side, and institutional capacity constraints as well. Now, when you look at all these items and you compare with the, the rapid population growth, then you realize that they are not in phase, and these things need to be in phase. Uh, this also goes hand in hand with the weakness in energy governance, which is very critical for us to be able to achieve these objectives that we are looking at. Now, for us to be able to bring this on board, for us to be able to invest, for us to be able to increase the energy access, then we need to access the, substantial financial resources. This has been an issue and a challenge, but of course, lately we have seen many development partners coming in. We have also seen some level of innovation coming in, and trying to be able to access this finance from various sources, which has been probably something I could say has been a milestone for Africa. So the roadmap, where are we heading to, and what are some of the things that we need to to look at? One is to be able to have an integrated African electricity network. Right now, we are looking at African single electricity market, and we are working towards ensuring that we have a robust electricity market in the whole of Africa. There are other challenges that, of course, underlie these ambitious program, but it's that can be achievable. The systems that is moving towards low carbon energy. Also to be able to have a robust infrastructure for economic and social development, and also to be able to work towards achieving our energy or Paris agreement that we have already acceded to or agreed to have in mind. Other elements that probably we need to look at is the energy efficiency programs for both buildings and industry as well as transport, and to be able to implement a systematic continent-wide approach to innovation and research and development. Lastly, we need to consider the element of integration, because it's very important, and the political willingness, which is also very critical, a critical element in that. Do we have opportunities in Africa? Yes, we do have lots of opportunities which you can be able to, tap into. One of it is being, the collaboration, or what we call collaborative investment with the locals, being able to, to contextualize and bring this investment and working together, be it through the PPPs or any other models of investment, which is also very important. And also availability of funding. Now we have various ways of, funding these projects, either bonds, crowdfunding, and many other ways. And we've had a number of, investors or development partners interested in, driving this agenda of energy transition. But also, in particular, looking at the renewable energy, we are seeing the opportunity in be able, to define and also to design a good tariffs that will be able to bring on board the renewable energy and support investment. And also there is also now increased awareness and transparent in procurement processes. Other opportunities available is to be able to increase the partial risk guarantees, which now we have many institutions coming on board and are trying to, to support the investment in these risky areas. We're also seeing some level of unbundling and competition in various countries, which is actually something that is also spreading very fast across most of the African countries. We also have increased research and development and collaborations with other institutions. And just to mention that one of the elements, or one of the ways in which we can be able to increase research is to collaborate and to capacitate, even through forums like this one, so that we can make people aware of what is going on and what really needs to be done. So this is one way of informing and also capacitating the continent. That also brings me to the last point, which is strengthening regional capacity and regional cooperation. You know, there's no country that can work, you know, as an island or even a continent. We need to work together. We need to look at what other people have done, and also we need to collaborate with like-minded institutions to be able to achieve this. So I think with all this, then it is possible for us to drive this agenda of energy transition, which again, I believe that should be done in a way that is systematic, I could say slow but sure, so that we can be able to know where we're starting from and where we're heading to. Thank you so much. That's all I have for today.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Mabea, for that. I will invite Diana to share her slides.
Okay. Let me see. Can you see the slide? Yes?
Yes, we can see
Yes.
that slide.
Thank you. Well, once again, thank you, Victoria, for the invitation. Today, I will provide you with an overview of Peru energy needs. And I would like to introduce you some of the challenges and also opportunities we as a country will have. And finally, my opinion regarding whether we are heading towards an energy transition or an energy progression scenario. So first of all, I am from here, from the Machu Picchu country. So Peru is, for those that don't know, Peru is located in the middle of South America, just next to the Pacific Ocean. We are a country that is well known for its macroeconomic steadiness and a very, digamos, a very important economic growth, particularly in the last 20 years. 35% of Peru population resides in the city capital in Lima. We also have a lot of natural resources. We are the second largest producer of silver and copper, but also we have oil and gas reserves and resources. In the middle of the energy transition path, I believe that it's also important to consider that our contribution to the CO2 emissions is very small compared to developed countries. This is our primary energy matrix. As you can see, 75% of our energy consumptions is covered by oil and gas at this moment. Hydroelectric energy also has an important portion in our energy matrix. Regarding power generation, as you can see in this slide, by 2019, maybe around 60% of our energy power generation came from water, hydropower plants, and the second source of energy was thermal energy. That means, as you can see in the picture in the right, mostly is 34% of natural gas and a bit of diesel. You know, as you can see here, our power generation matrix is very well balanced. It's not a pollutant and energy generation industry as compared to developed countries. 60% of our energy comes from hydro plants, which is very, very environmentally friendly. You know. By 2020, the picture stayed a little bit, as you can see, this was 2019, 2020 was almost the same. At this moment, our renewable energy resources have achieved 5% of participation in our energy matrix. Our installed capacity has been boosted by the natural gas plants. Since 2004, when the natural gas Camisea fields start production, we increased considerably the capacity of our energy generation plants. As you can once again see, most of our energy in Peru is produced by hydro plants and thermal plants. In this graphic, you can also see more in detail which are our energy sources. Most of it, since the last 3 years at least, is covered by natural gas, as you can see here, and also we have water. A very small portion comes from wind and solar sources. Why do we have so much water? Because we are next to the Pacific Ocean, but mostly because we have all the Amazon River in one side of the country. So we have a lot of water, and that's a good opportunity we have. However, we also have a meaningful oil and gas production in our country. As you can see in this graphic, at this moment, we have always produced oil. In fact, Peru has a long history of oil productions, more than 160 years. By 1994, we used to produce like this amount, but now we only produce a third of the crude oil we used to produce. However, this has been compensated by our natural gas production that at this moment amounts for 85% of our oil and gas production. We also have a lot of oil and gas reserves and resources, both in oil and natural gas. Why this is important? That although we produce our energy mainly from water and natural gas, and now we are talking about energy transition, our country still has a lot of natural resources yet to be developed, particularly in the oil and gas sector. We have 18 sedimentary basins, but although we have 18 sedimentary basins, we have only worked in 4 of them. And as you can see in the picture in the right, most of our basins are still underexplored. That means that our country still, there are still a lot of resources, of oil and gas resources yet to be discovered and developed and produced. And we are just in this context of energy transition that everybody says we should switch to the renewables. So the question is, what are we going to do with our natural resources, our oil and gas that is still there underground? So another point that is important to talk about is the energy gap in Peru. In the 90s, the energy gap was very, very big. It was terrible. We had a lot of blackouts. Only 41% of the rural population by 1924 had electricity, but by 2019, we switched the scenario, and only 20% of rural population's lack of electricity. How did we achieve this? Because the government promoted a lot of infrastructure projects, but also since 2017 they launched like a massive photovoltaic program. This program consisted in installation of solar panels in rural communities that had also like limited economic resources, and this program was funded by contributions made by the electricity sector and also by the fossil fuel consumers. As you can see here, this is our national and rural electrification rate. We have, most of our countries already has access to electricity. There are some isolated systems, but most of the countries, even rural population, have electricity. And maybe the challenge now is to make it make this source of energy more affordable, because it's in the region is not the cheapest one, it's not the most expensive, but it's not cheap. So for poor communities, we have to make some improvements regarding the cost of energy. I wanted to show this picture because I don't know if you have heard about the mountain of 7 colors that is also in Cusco, very close to Machu Picchu. This mountain was not visible when I was a kid. It became visible because of the glaciers melting, you know, because of the climate change. So this Peru is one of the countries that is suffering the most the consequence of the climate change that everybody knows about. So the country is very committed to to tackling this issue. And in last year, we raised our greenhouse gas reduction goal from 30% to 40%, within the commitments acquired in the Paris Agreement. Of course, this biggest goal depends a lot on the economic contribution that we will receive from other governments, multilateral agencies, NGOs that could finance some of the initiatives to switch to the renewable or to invest more in renewables. But one important thing is that although the government has raised the goal, it hasn't published how we are going to achieve that goal. So everybody knows that the government wants to support renewables, but also at the same time, we hear that we have to put in value our natural gas. In fact, at this moment, we're in the middle of general elections, and the two candidates, the final candidates, are talking about how are we going to make our natural gas stay in Peru rather than being exported. So there is kind of a contradiction there. So because of this lack of roadmap from the government, the private sector has published a roadmap of some ideas like how they think we could achieve this energy, new energy, renewable energy targets. As you can see, Deloitte recently published this document, and they made different scenarios. The increased ambition scenario was based on just keeping the same level of CO2 emissions that we have at this moment, and the green development scenario is achieving zero CO2 emissions by 2050. So in these two scenarios, as you can see, the hydroelectric, this hydro, it will keep its part in the energy matrix. However, solar, which is the green light part, and the wind energy based energy will have a more protagonistic part in our energy matrix in both scenarios. Something that I do not like is that in the green development scenario, what they are thinking is to reduce the amount of energy produced by natural gas. That's something that worries me, because what are we going to do so with our natural resource? Are we going to leave it there underground? Well, there is a contradiction in the policies in Peru, because there are a lot of laws saying that they want to massify the use of natural gas. They want the transport to switch to natural gas rather than diesel. But at the same time, there is a lot of pressure from NGOs, from activists, from some particular companies saying that we have to rush into the renewable energy, that we have to switch to electric vehicles. But why? Why is there such a rush? Because when I see our energy matrix, I don't see that it's it's not pollutant, and our contribution to the CO2 emission worldwide is very small. So we are not going to make a big impact in this global scenario. This was talking about this talks about the electric vehicle switch. So some conclusions, and I'm very sorry if I spoke too fast and my English is a little bit rough. First of all, Peru is committed to tackling climate change. There is no doubt on that. But we have to take into account that Peru's energy matrix is quite balanced and its contribution to global CO2 emissions is very little. And so another point is that we have a lot of oil and gas reserves and resources yet to be discovered and yet to be developed. So the government roadmap towards energy transition should clearly consider what to do with our oil and gas reserves. We cannot just be blindfolded by this I don't know how to say, but I don't want to say fashion, but this pressure there is around changing to renewable energies, considering that we have other alternatives in our country. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the brilliant presentation, Diana. Without wasting any time, we shall move on to Dr. Wefa Eddie to make his presentation also. And for our participants, if you have any questions, please do send the questions through.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I don't have slides, and that was deliberate, to be honest, because within 10 minutes, I just wanted to engage with the issues and see how we can speak honestly about such a really, really important topic. And so I will talk in a way that, to a very large extent, my academic hat at some point would be taken off, and I would speak like an African and someone that is deeply concerned. The conversation between energy transition and energy progression is one that has gained significant momentum in a way that has been engineered to a very large extent by the geopolitics of most of the advanced energy systems. And it calls to the question how we, again, Africans, and indeed those in the Latin region, are able to rethink and re-strategize and redesign an energy system that is suitable to our own specific needs. Because history tells us that all we've done, again, I speak from an African context, is sit back and watch. Sadly, I attended the African Mining and Oil and Gas Conference, I think it was 2 years ago. And I was invited to speak, and I sat at the back of the hall and watched as different ministers of energy and natural resources from African countries were basically cap in hand begging foreign companies to come and invest, as you would say it, but basically take away the resources. Now, caught up by the political economy of speed, on one hand, we understand the pressures to develop and grow, but on the other hand, we have seen the absolute shameful mismanagement of these resources at the expense of the everyday citizen. In order to understand the divergence of these conditions and the situations we find ourselves, we might need to take a few steps back. And that is looking at where are we coming from? In order to transition or progress, as Victoria has eloquently analyzed, we need to ask ourselves, where are we coming from? And I'll point out a few examples drawing from the Nigerian experience. So oil and gas exploration started in Nigeria back in the 1880s. It started. Some people say 1893, some people say 1896, whichever one you choose, around that time. And unfortunately, it was hindered by the First and Second World War. And it wasn't until 1958 that the first oil and gas in commercial quantity was lifted from Nigeria. 2 years after Nigeria got its independence. It got its independence 2 years after the first commercial quantity of oil and gas had been lifted from the country, and the company, again, because this is recorded, I'm going to be careful some of the things I say, but I'm happy to have these interactions afterwards. The company, again, these are all documented, so I'm happy to share some papers with you. But again, the company had a license to explore and exploit for oil in the entire country, right? The country had a license to exploit for oil in the entire country. Nobody gives such a license. Now, if you've gotten the license to exploit for oil in the entire country, and 2 years after, we were very excited that we've gotten independence, not knowing the reason why they were there was to get the license and get onto the oil. So we sat back jubilating for independence while the real cookie had been taken. And it continued to be taken 50, 60, 70 years after. Unfortunately, those resources that has been taken has yielded, and I say it with some conviction and confidence, have meant absolutely nothing for the everyday Nigerian citizen. And the situation is very well replicated in other parts of Africa. 10 years ago, Ghana thought their situation would be different. As we speak, it is absolutely no different. So if we've sat back and watched in this way, the way resources have been taken, we are experiencing energy poverty and energy crisis. We are vulnerable, most hit, would likely to be the most hit by climate change. We have a population that is growing exponentially, likely to get to over 300 million by 2050. It means the energy demands would increase. And we are likely going to experience climate change in a way that predictions are not sitting quite well. Now, for conversations like this, I'm very, very mindful because at some point it gets really, really depressing and frustrating. And it gets depressing for two main reasons. One, it means we have not learned from our past. And I don't have the sort of confidence that I would require to see anything change in the nearest future. So we need to begin to ask ourselves, drawing lessons from our experience in the past and asking ourselves, what would the future look like? Now, these are answers that I would not be very specific in giving you very clear answers, but because if we have to, I know Victoria and the rest of us would have to write volumes and volumes of books to get to the core of this conversation, because you could see from Mabea's presentation that is so multifaceted. It's a tree with 1,000 branches, and you're beginning to ask yourself, which all the branches do you pick on? So back to the question on energy transition and energy progression, my answer is we don't need any of them until we are very clear about what exactly energy transition means. Is it energy transition as it means to the US? Is it energy transitions as it means to Norway, the UK? Well, the core question is, who is fooling who? China hasn't stopped producing coal. The US hasn't stopped fracking. The UK has a mature an MER strategy, maximization of economic recovery strategy, which means it is really pushing to maximize the recovery from the North Sea while transitioning. So I propose something slightly different. I would prefer to see an energy revolution, and a very radical one that comprises a robust energy mix that takes account of the climate implications and the social justice implications. So basically what I'm doing is a social legal analysis that puts everything into context. And if you begin to put it all into context, you will then be able to design an energy revolution strategy that best suits you. Because When we talk about energy transition in the UK and how it impacts energy systems and energy justice, people are actually talking about not building wind turbines or energy environments or energy systems on their playgrounds, on the corpse of their ancestors. So we're seeing planning permits being rejected because maybe a wind turbine is going to be built on the heads of the ancestors. A wind turbine is going to be built on people's playgrounds. Where I come from, people are pleading that their resources, where they feed, where they survive, where they drink water from, is not damaged. Do you see the contradiction? So if we don't begin to redesign an energy strategy, a revolution that takes into account our peculiarities, we will be caught up sitting and watching. And it wouldn't be the first time. And sometimes we make this energy transition conversation like it just happened 5 years ago or just happened last year. The first wind turbine was built in 1883. That should tell us something, that it's been a journey and it's a process. All right? The first offshore wind turbine was built in Denmark 30 years ago. So while we are thinking of how to reorganize ourselves and design an energy strategy that best suits us, we should not ignore that we will be lagging behind if we do not draw these valuable lessons. So I'm approaching this from two ends. I'm trying to design something that is a balance between China's energy revolution and the UK's MERO and energy transition strategy. And it would be an energy revolution that promotes energy consumption, all right, because we have to be conscious of our energy consumption. It would be one that would promote energy supply. It would be an energy supply revolution. So where are we getting our energy from? It will be one that will be an energy technology revolution, and then an energy system revolution. So from all ends. And then it will be one that bridges back to that's the Chinese version, and it would be the one, the UK version that sort of bridges the gap between maximization of energy recovery and energy transition. So that means we will do what we can with the resources we have, make the most of it, plug all the loopholes, the waste and the management, while we perhaps use the resources in areas and aspects that require greater energy efficiency and needs. So as you would see very clearly, the question posed is not an easy one. And it's frustrating because, again, we would have this conversation, I'm sure, next year, and we would have it 10 years after, and Victoria will write an excellent book, and perhaps I will publish a few articles and book, and we will be back to this over and over and over again. And it is depressing. So, to conclude, my thinking is, and this goes out to academics, policy makers, government officials, that time is not on our side. The energy crisis in Africa is painful to watch. And there's been an element of trust that has been bestowed on us to speak our truth, whatever happens. And we should begin to have very honest conversations with those who are in the positions of changing things. And I'm very happy Dr. Mabea is here, so that perhaps maybe in the nearest future, we would not just be having webinars that engage with the issues, and in reality, there is absolutely no difference. Let's begin to engage with the stakeholders, and hopefully they would listen. So that's my time, and I'm happy to take any questions and happy to have any further engagements on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie, for the brilliant presentation. Since we're almost running out of time, I would like to invite Professor Pablo to also make his presentation.
Hello, everyone. Do you see the slides? Yes?
Yes, we can see the slides.
Okay, well, wonderful. I will start with a general introduction into South America and Latin America, and then focus on Argentina, where I was born and I am currently living, okay? Okay, hold on. So basically, the situation around Latin America is a sum up of everything the former four panelists have said. The key problem, I think, is a problem of governance right now. There are several twists and returns of former usual suspects to government, as in Peru, for example. They don't know which way, if middle left or middle right, there, or extreme right, I don't know how to define her. They are going to be in the next year. In Ecuador, the same happened. The Correa candidate lost, so now they are moving towards a rather liberal situation. In Uruguay, this political and socioeconomical reality is neoliberal. Actually, it's a good opportunity for investors and for foreign companies to develop the business, because several international bid rounds are incoming. For example, the port of Uruguay was bid for, I think it was 50 years. So the reality in Brazil is completely different, because, as you know, Brazil is a BRIC, and it has a rather imperialist position, both in relation to the surrounding South American countries, as well as in relation to the international community. It has its own pathway, and even though it may have lineups with Western states in relation to decarbonization and oil consumption and production and everything, the Bolsonaro administration, they want to provide the public opinion with the idea that he has his own position taken, even though he is lined up with the United States, basically. Well, in Bolivia, as well as in Brazil and in Argentina, we have the unusual circumstance, and this has a lot to do with the governance, that former presidents who were involved in the Odebrecht problem, I don't know if everyone is well, acknowledged with the Odebrecht corruption process in the United States. They were condemned previously by Supreme Courts, and now they got the decision null and void. So, for example, President Lula da Silva can run for presidency again, and President Evo Morales can run for president again. And we have the vice president in Argentina, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, who has 18, well, now I think it's 16. She had 18 criminal causes open, including organized crime, so to say, in relation to the Odebrecht cause. The Odebrecht cause was a systematic corruption activity originated by the Odebrecht company in Brazil. And what they did basically was to bid international logistics and infrastructure bids, such as, for example, oil and gas transportation. And instead of charging 100% of the costs, they doubled or tripled the costs, and that implied approximately 50% of corruption money. Okay, so in the end, in 10 years' time of the previous Kirchner administration, the unofficial numbers are that approximately 2 GDPs were lost in corruption, for you to have an idea. So that is the reality in Latin America. And it's not only in Argentina, it's basically everywhere. That is one of the three main reasons Latin America doesn't progress. Okay, the other two, in my opinion, are organized crime and narcotics. But the three are connected with the activities of the politicians, who are theoretically supposed to take them off of the reality. The other interesting reality is that the politicians become energy stakeholders, and that is a reality that is very normal. For example, in Argentina, former 1990s Washington Consensus, Congressman Manzano, he became an amazing shale oil and gas stakeholder. Without his joint venture, it's impossible to develop an energy shale development in Neuquén or Mendoza. Okay. In relation to Mexico, which is theoretically since the NAFTA, North America, but actually it's Latin America. They had an energy reform during the Peña Nieto presidency, which was quite shocking for the Mexican state. They moved backwards in relation to that. That reform modified the constitution since 1929, correct me if the number is 1929 or 18, I don't remember. I don't recall well, since the revolution in that year, only the Mexican states and provinces and the company Pemex could develop oil and gas, because they were so sick and tired of United States companies to rape the oil and gas resources, that they decided that only Mexicans would do that. Well, for 1 century, they developed their own resources, but they got stuck in time and technology and development. So Peña Nieto came with this reform, which was working quite well, but then eventually López Obrador moved backwards because he's a left-winger, actually, in comparison to Mr. Peña Nieto. But now Mr. Biden, he wants to decarbonize economics. So the wonder at this point is, what is going to do Mexico with all his oil? Because if you analyze the economics of Mexico, it has a huge production, a huge perspective, and a huge amount of working mass who depends on Pemex. Pemex is a huge company, the same as in Argentina, YPF, and in Brazil, Petrobras, and in Angola, Sonangol, right? I mean, you have generations and generations and generations of people who depend on these national oil companies. For example, 1/3 of the budget of Pemex goes on people who are retired, on retirement costs. For you to have an idea, this is over 65-year-old people who are still living on Pemex. So that is a reality that Mexicans are going to have to deal with. So I am going to move forward quickly. So this is the Argentine reality. We have the matrix on the right, upper right. Approximately of the entire generation matrix, we are still dual gas dependent It used to be higher, but it's a little bit lower after the Macri administration because we had an increase in renewables. Theoretically, the Renovar rounds were going to be the revolution of renewables and decarbonization in Argentina, but again, funding didn't show up. And why did funding not show up? Governance, the lack of political qualification by the administrators, and the lack of trust of our own nationals. We have to be honest, again, as Mr. Wife says, there is a lot of money in Argentina, a lot of money which Argentines don't want to invest in their own national development, okay? They would rather play financial gaming, okay? This recalls I think the translation into English, Dostoevsky's novel, the player, the gambler, financial gambling. Argentine people prefer financial gambling to substantial economic tangential investment, which could be, for example, farming, solar plant. This area in Argentina is very strong in solar potential, while these areas have excellent wind capacities, okay? Then we have the oil and gas basin in Neuquén here, which is the second shale and type.
Sorry, Pablo, you have
we run our
wrap up, yes.
I'm sorry?
2 minutes to wrap up. We're running out of time.
Okay. So basically, Argentina has all the resources. It lacks political stability and trust funding from its nationals. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Pablo, and thank you very much all our panelists, our experts. So I don't see any questions. I see a hand that is. All right. I see Akin Bobola. Would you like to ask your question? I've permitted you to ask. Akin, are you there? All right. I saw a remark from Ailey. Ailey, are you there? I see Othman. Othman, would you like to ask your question?
Hello, everyone. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Add on Dr. Whitmer's point concerning the overwhelming kind of pressure that's coming from the West. And my question is directly going to Dr. Mabea. Based on his presentation, the focus, basically on the East African region, is on ensuring almost like a whole transfer from the conventional kind of energy sources to renewable sources. And he's aware that most of the sub-Saharan African countries now are just starting to exploit their natural resources, just like like Mrs. Diana said, concerning the oil and the natural gas of Peru. If people just jump on the idea of shifting to renewables only, what will happen to the natural resources that will be left underground? So Dr. Abe was very specific that the projection is shifting from the conventional energy sources to renewables only. Is he considering having a balanced energy matrix that will consider using the conventional at the same time integrating the renewable sources like the off-grid? We know that most of the rural areas in Africa and some countries are remote. So you need the off-grid connections to support that sector, but at the same time, not ignoring the economic power of the oil and natural gas resources in boosting the economic growth of these countries. So my question to Dr. Mabeya, what is your consideration of having a balanced energy matrix that will accommodate all energy sources without ignoring the conversion that's now oil and natural gas? And then to sum up with Dr. Wifa's point concerning maybe kind of a, should I say, the confusion, because you understand that most of these West African countries, or the Europe, or the white countries, if I'm very specific, they have exploited their natural resources, to be specific, coal. Is it that they have maybe estimated or carried out an analysis that their resources are just nearing depletion, that they are pushing the world to the extent of only focusing on the issue of the adverse effects of the emission to the environment? No one is ignoring that will have issues concerning the environmental impacts of these carbon emissions. But just to relate that to the current situation of COVID-19, very many people were saying that if it comes to Africa, it will almost explode. We are here, almost a year. The impact has been there, but not as it was projected. If we take the idea of having dangerous issues to do with emissions and we ignore the exploitation of our natural resources, I think that might be a move to keep us in this kind of economic kind of trend, that we don't exploit those resources to develop like the way they did in the past, because most of those countries exploited coal. You look at Ireland, you look at the USA, South Africa is developing because it has been exploiting coal to generate energy. I would prefer having a balanced kind of energy matrix other than transferring the idea and we put it into other countries without logical reason, just like Dr. Wifa put it up. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Actually, that's a very important question, and I would like all our panelists to comment on that question in just 2 minutes, because I don't see any other questions from people. But before that, Ailey, did you want to say something? Because I don't see any other questions from our participants.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Dr. Victoria. I don't really have a question. I just want to add on the presentation that was made by Diana and Dr. Wifa. Really understanding, I think for me, my stance is just, as I said, taking a more cultural critique approach in understanding whether countries should either transition or progress. Because I think we really need to understand how different countries perceive the climate change or energy transition, because the geological setting is not the same, especially if you're looking in the global north and global south, because they have different energy needs. And just like Diana was basically explaining, why are we rushing into something without really looking into it? So I think by taking on a concept such as cultural critique, it allows us really to understand more of why countries are taking a transition approach and why others want a more progressive approach.
All right, thank you very much. Now we shall respond to the question from Othma. By our participants, you just have 2 minutes each to respond, and then that will be the end of the webinar. I'll start with you, Dr. Mabeya, because the question was initially addressed to you. And then I'll get Eddie's view to that, and also Diana, and then Pablo, and then that will be the end of our webinar.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nalule, and thank you, Othman, for that wonderful question. I want to point out, because I have just 2 minutes, I just to bring out some few issues here. Number one, in my presentation, I indicated clearly that we are thinking of decentralized and centralized grids. When you mention decentralized, essentially we incorporate the things like the off-grid and the main grid. So that is part of the main agenda that we are having and we're looking at in Africa and in most of the countries. Number two, a centralized grid is also very important because we are interested in coming up with electricity markets, being able to tap electricity from one region to the other. Some countries do not have sufficient resources, and it will be easier for them to be able to get a cheaper resources from other countries. So it is important that we also have the grid and also interconnection. Now, there is no one who has probably given this mandate that you should not exploit the natural resources. Neither have probably has any maybe country stopped you from harnessing these resources. But there are several other considerations which we need to have and probably to take into consideration. Number one, the impact, the environmental impact. We cannot ignore this. But also on the other side, we cannot rely on, for example, 100% renewable energy because we also need to have the grid balances. These things are there. So what we are looking at is a strategic approach to exploitation of these resources, which actually Dr. Weaver mentioned very clearly and put it very, succinctly. A strategic approach to be able to, bring on board these resources. I'll give you an example. If you have sufficient renewable energy and you do not have, for example, the fossil fuel resources, then why bother so much with these other resources when you can be able to tap? I'll give you an example of Kenya. Kenya can be fully supported by geothermal energy. That's a thermal energy, fully 100% by thermal energy alone, and as well as probably renewable. Why then again bother into this other region? But when you go to the other countries again, they can be fully supported, by the thermal resource or fossil fuel based. So if we have this strategic approach, then we can be able to attain this main objective. I think that's what I really had in mind. Thank you.
Yeah. I think these are brilliant questions. I saw another one pop up just by the corner asking if Africa can fund, the energy transition. My answer is yes. So let me give an example. Norway produces 99% of its electricity from renewable, yet it is the richest, or perhaps the richest oil country in the world. So that's why you see climate litigation now taking Norway to court saying, you have all the energy from renewables, but you're selling all your oil, so stop selling all your oil. So, they're pulling Norway in different directions here. However that succeeds, I mean, that's a conversation for another day. In terms of funding, you could do it through energy democratic systems. So for instance, in Nigeria, where I come from, people are already funding their energy supplies, and the ones they fund is actually more than what the country generates. So people buy generators, they buy diesel, and they fund these things themselves. If we had channeled those resources again through an energy democratic system, perhaps we might be able to contribute. But then again, because of the level of the waste we have in other energy sectors, particularly oil and gas, it is absolutely difficult for us to fund that, because as a result of the colonial era, and even after the colonial list, or even after the colonialist had left, what we had is what I refer to as existential fragile states. And so even those who took over, who are actually from the countries themselves, have continued to live in that same culture of waste and thinking the resources is just meant for the few who have access to them. So you see themselves political cronies giving themselves a variety of oil blocks. If we don't do that and we channel the resources, we might be able to fund. And then back to the question that was originally asked. When it comes to energy transition, and Amabel has said that, it's not about stop oil and go to renewable. It's for Africa, it's more than that. It's more complex. It's a system that, because for you to transition, you need to even be able to understand the technology, design the technology. Energy transition is not overnight. I mean, countries are taking 30, 40 years to even get to where we are, and we haven't even started. Do you get? We've not even started, so we're not even part of the conversation. So it will be very similar to what's happening with China and Africa, where 30, 40 years after, we start begging the Chinese to help us build wind turbines. And then we're back to square zero. So it's a really complex conversation. Again, it gets depressing when I have this conversation because it just takes me on a journey that I really don't want to go. But again, I think it's important we have it, and we need to continue to engage with those who can actually change the trajectory. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Dana, would you like to respond in 2 minutes? But before that, I would like to also just point out one thing. No one is saying that stop the exploration of oil and gas, but however, we need to be sure and understand the impact of this energy transition on the investments in our country. Look at the investments in fossil fuels. They are declining because of the pressure from the climate change activists, because of the pressure on the energy transition dialogue. So it's not an issue of no one is asking you to stop, but the measures that are being put in place to transition, they are affecting countries that are still relying on oil and gas. But anyway, I'm not the one discussing here. Dana, would you like to respond to the issue in 2 minutes?
Yes, Victoria, I totally agree with what you just said. I think that there are two important questions. Why are we talking about energy transition? And if we think that's something that we want for our countries, how are we going to achieve that? And when do we want to start on that and achieve certain goals? And I wanted to share with you, I am in a promotion department of the Oil and Gas Agency. So every year it's harder and harder for us to convince oil companies to invest in new exploration projects, particularly to the big oil companies. Just to give you an example, last 2 years ago, we signed 6 technical evaluation agreements with BP, with British Petroleum. And we were very happy, and it was a huge project. However, last year, they told us, oh, okay, we are sorry, we have to release the areas because our parent company has decided that we have to become greener, you know, so we will be putting on hold all the exploration projects. We will just keep the production projects. So that puts us countries that are in the same situation as Peru, that still needs exploration investments, in a very difficult situation. So I totally agree with what Victoria said. Oil and gas production will continue, but it will be harder for countries that still rely on that natural resource. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you very much. Pablo, 2 minutes, please.
Okay, I think in Argentina, the problem is similar as the one mentioned in Africa. Even though we have good precedents, we are, instead of evolving, we are moving backwards. We had our own atomic program. So the first atomic plants were our own evolution and development in the 50s and 60s. We had a wonderful hydro plan from the 50s onwards. But nevertheless, in the last 10 to 20 years, there has been an inconvenience of I told you, of investment, both in conventional hydrocarbon development. We don't have reserves. The exploration has moved offshore by foreign companies, which have stopped exploring because of the current administration. The current administration has already changed the Secretary of Energy twice. And in the meantime, we have been negotiating with the Russians and the Chinese, and now with the Germans, the taking of the lithium in the northern part of the States in order to build batteries for the future, transportation means. So I think we are basically at the end of the 19th century model, where foreign companies come, they take our natural resources, and as in, in the trade model, we get the processed technology in return. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Pablo. I see we've run out of time, so this will be the end of our webinar. But I note that I've invited you, our viewers, especially the participants and the panelists, who would like to share their views on the concept of energy progression. Please do respond to the questions I've put for you, and then send your responses to the email address which I have shared, and we shall be able to feature your answers and responses and your views, because at the end of the day, the more you learn from people, the more you shape your understanding of the concepts, the more you understand the different energy challenges countries face, and then the more we come up with common solutions to tackle the common challenges we are facing. So this will be the end of the webinar. Thank you very much, our participants. Thank you very much, our team of experts, international experts, energy experts. And do not forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Share the video with all your colleagues who have missed the discussion. And that's it. Have a lovely day, have a lovely week, and bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
All right.